Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to a very energizing session today. I'm joined by the leaders of the industry, not just from India, but from China as well. Just to introduce the leaders on the panel today, and it's an exciting discussion today in terms of trying to understand what did China do post the COVID curve, which was actually getting over, and how did they resurrect their economy? What impact the measures had on the resurrection measures had on the real estate and construction sector? How did the built environment sector come up post COVID? So with these exciting questions in our mind, let me welcome onto the panel my colleague and Managing Director for Greater China, Mr. Pierpaolo Franco from RICS. He's the Managing Director for RICS in the entire China region, which includes Hong Kong and other places as well. So I'm sure he will have a lot of perspective, including the entire macroeconomic perspective of what has gone on in China during COVID and post-COVID. Then I'm joined by Mr. Nayan Shah, and I'm very thankful for MCHI CREDAI to partner with us in this key agenda of ours to try and learn from China and make sure that some of those learnings could be given back to our Indian contemporaries and our Indian business leaders over here. Mr. Nayan Shah, welcome, President MCHI CREDAI. Mr. Mark Richards, FRICS, Managing Director for North and East Asia for Turners and Townsend, somebody who has closely seen the resurrection of the construction business in China right now, immediately post-COVID. We are joined by Mr. Ameya Gumaste, FRICS, Country Head for India for Turners and Townsend, to try and reflect on the Indian story of that construction resurrection in China. Mr. Deepak Goradia, President-elect for MCHI CREDAI, and Mr. Ajay Nahar, MD for Nahar Group. So with that, if I may actually bring upon Mr. Pierpaolo. Pierpaolo, if I can take your views on the macroeconomic perspective of how China dealt through with this crisis, and what do you think is the situation right now in terms of the economic recovery in the country, which India can emulate?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Nimish. Well, in a nutshell, in January, the economy had a complete stop. The lockdown was week by week very harsh and substantial. So all businesses has been stopped, if not the essential. Essential means a little bit of food supply chain and everything that was linked to medical supply. That has created a zero GDP pretty much in quarter one of 2020. But having said that, has been also a lockdown very effective. So in 2 months, the cases had a big spike and then coming down up to the point to do the reopening. Of course, some small and medium business, mostly related to what we can define as large retail, has suffered a big hit in these months. The areas of the industry as a whole has been affected, as everywhere in the world. The transport has been stopped, tourism has been stopped, and the suffering from that has been quite significant. Without considering that at the moment China is still locked down on bringing people in from abroad, so it's very difficult to come in. Almost impossible if you don't have a Chinese passport. Visa are still suspended. So there is a fraction of the international flight that were coming into China before. In the past 3 weeks, we have seen a progressive reopening. And nowadays, the level of confidence is pretty high, especially in tier one cities, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. There is a concern in the north across the border with Russia, where we have seen a spike of new cases and a confinement of those cases. The government, as you know, play a significant primary role in this process. So everything needs to be followed very, very, very strictly. The economy has restarted. Industry as a whole has restarted. Construction and real estate industry has started. The internal traveling is possible without big restriction if you don't come from areas at level 1 of so high risk, the one that I named a few seconds ago. And there is a new normal that, to be honest, appear not to be that dissimilar to the old normal to today. That's in a nutshell what is happening. Of course, there are plugged on top of what was happening before, new processes that are sometimes related to prevention of disease, sometimes related to constraint that the construction industry has had in bringing back people to the sites and ensure that they were sound and safe, but also don't bring in the coronavirus. So life seems to be quite normal, with a reopening also of public gathering, and next week the whole school will come back, including the youngest one that has been delayed so far. It is meant to open also theater and cinemas from June the 1st, if nothing changes. So it is a way of a recovery that on the surface is that. From the economy point of view, of course, there is a debt that has been is significant, and consumers and the confidence is not yet returned to normal. So we have seen a slowing down of transaction. There is a market that in some areas is becoming, office-wise, for example, oversupplied, and so there are issues that we need to solve. And
so if I, in terms of this economic recovery, just talk closely to the place that the life is going to become absolutely normal in China from June onwards, which is an encouraging sign for the world. What do you think? I mean, will the economic recovery in India is going to be different from what we are seeing in China? While Pierpaolo did say that there has been a dent in Chinese economy, the confidence is yet to come back. What do you think? I mean, in case, while we are yet to see the bottom of the crisis over here, what do you think? I mean, in terms of our country, would the economic recovery be similar to what we are seeing in China, or what's your take on that, Mr. Shah?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And it's a great pleasure for CREDAI MCHI to be with this august institution and to come together and give a kind of a world perspective to all the professionals. So, and we wish that we do this more often on different topics. With these pleasantries, I would like to say that yeah, we have been significantly affected, yes, and it will take at least another couple of quarters till we really get back into shape. And because what has happened is that more than 10 million migrant workers, who have been working at different places, they basically come from northern India. They have gone back to their states, and any economic activity requires a supply chain to be there all the time. And this supply chain has been broken. And as such, it's going to take time for the whole economy to really recover and get it back to shape to what it was before. Now coming to real estate, Nimish, my take on real estate is this way, that basically real estate is a one needs to see with a 3 to 10 year horizon.
Yep.
And I mean, Deepak's firm is in business since last 45 years. Ajay Nahar's firm is also there from last 40 years. We have been there for 55 years. So we have seen a lot of such recessions coming and going in different forms altogether, one way or the other. I personally consider this as production lost,
Right.
kind. It's not something that the economy has suddenly collapsed or something like that. Yes, there is no doubt that there has been significant job losses that will come because of retail, entertainment, commercial and shopping, and those things not doing well. But basically real estate is a 3 to 10 year horizon business, and I think couple of quarters, one can easily adjust. The only issue in this couple of quarters is liquidity. That how do I manage my cash flows to pay my salaries, to pay the interest, pay the loans, and stuff like that. So the Reserve Bank has eased this by giving us a moratorium. But as far as Resi is concerned, I think residential, everybody has realized that I was safe because I was in my home. And
Right.
hence, actually, what I have seen in my company over the last 45 days is that the inquiries on the phone have improved. The number of the length of the conversation has gone up. So whenever we get any lead on the digital medium and we call them up, earlier for every 10 calls, there would be only 2 calls that would be successful. Rest 8 would avoid talking or bang the phone. But today almost 4 or 5 of them, they talk. They take all the details of the project. They want to see the VR, they want to see the augmented reality, because they know that someday they need the house. And the moment they feel that the price of the house is fitting into their budget, they go deep down and ask the things. So my take is that uh, as far as the supply is concerned, that is the developers are concerned, there are two things that are going to decide about the consolidation or the further of that. Is number one is the contingent liability that every developer has, and second is his capability. Now, what I mean by contingent liability and capability, when we normally take a balance sheet of a developer, we see how much is his loan, how much is his equity, and stuff like that, and we say whether he's leveraged, under leveraged, or normally leveraged, whatever. But what is important is to see that how much of the project that he has announced is yet to be completed. So how far is he from the goal of completion of the building that he has announced? So say for example, if I have a project of 200 apartments and I have sold 25 apartments, whether my another 175 apartment is sold or not sold, I have to complete my building, and that will become a part of my contingent liability. So the point is, what is the contingent liability the developer carries as on date, which will determine how far he can go. And second is the capability, the human strength that he has. So both these things put together will actually decide about how is he going to take the whole thing further. So my take is that everybody will need to assess this, and once that is assessed, then the next step can be taken. I would also like to now deal with the third part, that until now, the government, the central government, has not announced any incentive scheme for the real estate. And we hope that the state government or the local authority would be able to do something, but currently they are completely busy fighting COVID. So let's wait for a few more weeks before they decide. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very challenging for the developers to survive, because neither and no supply side relief, and if demand side relief also doesn't come, then God knows what's going to happen to the real estate industry.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. If I can come to Deepak Bhai, Deepak, in terms of the economic shock which we have had for COVID in India, I mean, what measures do you think are to be factored for aggregating demand and supply chain issues from a built environment perspective? And then I will actually go over to Mark to try and discuss about the migrant labor issue, which Mr. Shah just raised. So, Deepak, if I can have your take on the demand and supply issues also.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Today, we are still in the lockdown period. Uh, we are expecting some relief of lockdown in the lockdown 4. Maybe sometime in a day or two, it's going to be announced by government. Hopefully, they have in India, we have 3 different color zone for the lockdown thing, like red and orange and green, and certain activities are permitted at certain level. We expect some better relaxation in the post this 4th lockdown. The situation over here is that everybody's sitting home, very limited activity is being carried out. So right now, to move into the economic scenario and to look at the supply chain and the construction and all, there are a lot of issues. But post lockdown, definitely economy point of view, activities point of view, developers point of view, construction site point of view, we intend to start. Supply chain point of view, certain area where green zone, definitely the engineering manufacturing activities already started. Certain supply chain point of view, steel, cement production availability is gradually getting improved. So we do see the scenario that it may take some time, it may take a couple of months to come to the gradually reaching to the level that we able to achieve a good supply chain. But the issue is, of course, the migrant laborers. Migrant laborers have, after waiting and for frustrating for a long time, they all started walking and reaching their native place. And we see almost every site, every developer is facing the problem that they have whatever number of laborers they have, 50% have already moved out, and in certain places even 80% of laborers have moved out. And to revive and then come back for any construction activity, the migrant laborers is one of the major challenge which we will be facing it. Maybe post monsoon or something, we can expect them to come back, because definitely they are dependent on our their income from various industry and the construction activity. They may meet their family, stay for some time in monsoon time, but finally we are hopeful that they will definitely be coming back, and we have to leave, start with the activity whatever with limited labor, go in for technology. But then migrant laborers post monsoon, once September, October onward, should come back, and it may take a couple of months for our economy point of view also gradually to take a revival. And as Nayan also said, that sales inquiries on real estate and things are little positive. People have understood the value of a house, value of a home. Challenges, of course, job loss, salary law cut, and various issues are there economic point of view. But still, we do see the scenario that gradually, once the lockdown opens, the activity opens in the subject to activity wise, and progressively opening of the economy, progressively opening of the activities would revive the confidence of people to come and start gradually accepting the reality that we have to live with COVID, we have to live with the whatever the measures required, and begin the new life with the COVID. And we do see the scenario that it will definitely come to the things that we will be able to work on in a couple of months, and we will, with the acceptance of COVID, we will start with the overall economic activity in 2 to 3 months time. Thank you.
So Deepak Bhai, if I can come to Mark, leading on to the point of migrant labor. Mark, and that I ask question to Mark, may I request the audience to put in their questions on the Q&A tab? I know I can already see that some of you are asking questions on this. One question before I go to Mark is around the status of construction, Pierpaolo, if you can speak about it. Has the construction activities come back to normal completely in China?
It's pretty much come back to normal in terms of number of activities. So there aren't limitation. Of course, in the area that I named before, where the coronavirus is still active, or when it comes up, there is an immediate stop. But if you take Shanghai, for example, today, all the activities are allowed, including this weekend. There has been an exhibition in the Shanghai Center in the district where we have the office, about electric car, to support the development of the electric car market here in China. It has been quite well attended. Then another factor is the level. So everything has started, but is still in recovery. So there are sites and construction sites that have been boosted up, others that are working in progress, but the level is not 100%. Probably we are talking about the 60 to 70% average.
Right. Thanks, Pierpaolo. Mark, if I can come to you. Also add in wherever he can. The in China for people or for the governments to adopt to make sure that migrant labor population can be continued, or their continuity can be ensured, to ensure the continuity of actually having a lot of restrictions of your views on this, please.
Yes, thank you. And I think this is perhaps one of the most interesting parts to discuss. I mean, the supply chain in general, and it's something that people to go. I think the migrant labour issue is both one of your greatest risks, but could be one of your greatest advantages. For example, when this hit in China, it was over Chinese New Year. So all of the labour population working on construction sites and anywhere else in China basically had gone home. So when this hit, everyone was in their home location. We had a site not far from Hubei province, so badly affected. And that was able to reopen in February, which, if you recall, is not long after the sort of peak of this. Now, you can either take the view that, yes, within a month or 2 months, you're going to completely wipe out COVID-19 in India. I just think, looking and having just got back from the UK and seen how once they let it go, they just couldn't get on top of it. And even in the UK, which is much smaller population than India, how they really have no idea how many people have been infected. I mean, I've got friends at home who've had COVID-19, been through it. No one's recorded their numbers. So there is no chance that they know how many people have actually had this and how many people are asymptomatic and still continuing to spread it. So you then tackle the question of getting back to work, and how do you do that? And the project that we had in China had over 1,000 people working on that site before the COVID-19 struck. And so when the government sort of got behind this, and they were very keen to get the labour force back and working because they realised the effects on the economy, they took the decision to support the project by opening up hotels in the area. They brought back the labour to those hotels. They quarantined them, and I mean, strictly quarantined them for 14 days. And when they were satisfied, they could then re-enter the labour camps. And then there they have to stay, because obviously if you've got people coming in and out of the labour camps, you've got that risk. So then you've got to decide how you take people in and out and re-quarantine them or test them for that work to then continue. And then you've got to consider all those other factors, like how do you bring materials to the site? Every time a delivery driver turns up, he is a risk to your site. And those are all the issues. So there's a huge amount to be thought about in terms of planning. So if people are sitting there, particularly on major construction sites, thinking that, oh, we just open our doors on day one, everyone returns, and then we're fine, I don't think they've really grasped the criticality of this and the seriousness of it. And I can just see that it will come around again. So that would be, one really good point in terms of learning is, as I say, because you've got labour camps, if you bring people back into labour camps, if you get COVID-19 in the labour camps, as has been shown by Singapore recently, it just goes through and it's very difficult to control just because of the nature of the way labour camps are built and the proximity of workers and the sharing of facilities. But if you clean your labour camps, if you strictly control the labour coming in there, then you can get your projects back up to work, because you can insulate them and isolate them and allow the project to continue in its own bubble, as it were.
Thank you, Mark. A very interesting take. And Ajay, if I can pull you in, and I will request if you can actually, and given the fact, Ajay, you are a very progressive thinker, if you think that there are relevant questions, I would request if you could jump in and ask the questions to the people who are seeing the resurrection in China also. But in this case, Ajay, I think the similarity between China and India is, I think very much there. But the fact that Chinese government could rein in on those unoccupied hotels to create a quarantine measures. While we are yet to see returning of labor, right now the labor are actually in a reverse situation. Right now they're going back to their homes, and I don't know when we will get them back. But in terms of getting them back into their work cities, what do you think? I mean, are we prepared to emulate similar measures which we saw in China in India over here? What do you think we will face as a challenge here?
Thank you, Nimish. And I would answer all those questions. First of all, good afternoon to all the panelists which are watching from RICS, CREDAI, and all the social platforms, and our patient audience who've gone through so many webinars. But of course, many of them found boring, but a lot of learning from it. So in continuing what Mr. Mark said, and what our President Nayan Shah said, and what Mr. Deepak Goradia said, I think there's one thing I'm just looking back in the 2 decades. The last couple of decades in the India, we've gone through many development trends, and we have fairly done decently well. Just to name a few, getting a foreign architect in one of those days, where that was the key thing for all the developers, and then the trend started. Then it was like building shopping malls and multiplexes. So then we had many of these all around India. Then it was making parking buildings. So we all went and tried to do that. It was of making of smart cities, which also we tried to work on and try to successfully do many of those things. Also establishing co-working spaces. So basically India has gone ahead and tried every bit to be there along with the trends that are there in the real estate. So having said that, and we've been there and we've done that, now there's a bigger challenge in front of us, which is the way of living along with the COVID, and we need to adopt this change. Of course, migrant issue, labor issue is here to stay, and it's on us. How do we extract the maximum pool out of the limited pool that is available? So Indian construction industry has to rapidly mechanize, which means investment in construction equipment, formwork system, digitization of key processes such as progress tracking, inspections, tracking labor force on live basis through IoT, availability to implement sanitization every few hours, including auditable record temperatures with health statistics of laborers, project managers, site visitors on a daily basis. Of course, all this is there is a cost, and with the technology, I think this can be divided amongst the contractors and all the stakeholders for a project. This is a golden opportunity. Earlier developers, contractors were hesitant, but now an opportunity to implement this system is there in between us. We just have to bite the bullet of 20 rupees a square feet or something like that and get a HSE involved in every project. So I think a new regulation and forced training of labor with high skilled labor available 12 months with a professional construction crew as such may help these kind of reforms that can come into real estate. So I think we'll end up something in a full-fledged program, safety, quality, discipline for soft skill things. So we can invest a bit more in that, because at long term, this is important, because few things we don't look into in our daily operations. Saying this, I would also like to question Mark and Pierpaolo on these are our thoughts, and as an architect and a developer, this is what I think. But as per your experience, what do you think, who would be the change agents in our system to get this transformation?
Mark?
I think, sorry, perhaps if I come in there, I think definitely right. All of those things, off-site construction, more digitization, all of that's going to come in. And hopefully one of the positives out of COVID-19, if there can be anything, is that it will accelerate that change, which I think has been needed anyway. I mean, you know, sort of India lags far behind the rest of the world in terms of, or most of the rest of the world in terms of modern methods of construction. But I don't see as there's going to be a swift change from this. I think that would be unrealistic. I think, you know, even in the ways of working, what we've seen in China, and I think Pierpaolo said this, is the new norm is very similar to the old norm. So thinking that we're all going to come back to work in 3 months or 4 months in India and see robots building buildings is not going to be the case. And there's going to be a great need for labour, and that change will continue, but hopefully it'll be accelerated by what we've seen. You know, I think, as I say, in the ways of working, we've not seen real estate operators and owners change in what they're doing. I think they've made measures. People have taken desk spaces out, allowed people to work from home while they wait and see what happens. Bear in mind, you know, if there is a vaccination for this, and everyone believes that this is one you know, thing that will happen, is there will be a vaccination for this. It's unlike HIV and things like that, where people have accepted that's more difficult to create a vaccine for. People see this as being a flu virus. Not that I'm any expert in this, but all the talk I hear is that there will be a vaccine developed for it, and therefore, you know, maybe 12 months or 18 months from now, this won't be an issue. And it is a 1 in 100 year event, as everyone refers to it. So are we going to change everything? Are we going to go back to cellular offices on the basis of changing everything that we've been doing over the last 20, 30 years in open plan offices on the basis of something that could be short-lived, as short as 12 or 18 months, depending on how the medical profession managed to move their science forward, as it were. So that would be my take. I don't know, Pierpaolo, you've probably got another.
Yeah, no, I concur with this view. And I can say that a great advantage that China has had in the immediate post COVID-19 is the already existing high level of digitalization. So has been particularly easy for building owners and property managers to adapt the technology that we're already using to track people, to measure temperature everywhere. There is also behavior-wise, people are used to get under cameras, are used to a very effective and digitalized world. You come into airport in China, it's very common that you have facial recognition, you pass under a temperature detection. We cannot also forget that this part of the world has been badly affected by SARS, and is not uncommon, even before the coronavirus, seeing everyone wearing masks around. So there is a predisposition of the people in in helping and support themselves. But having said that, I really agree with Mark, and that I don't see a scenario completely changes. Owners are still facing the issue of how to make their 90% occupancy rate as soon as possible, and and the construction side need to finish their work on time and on the quality that they've been requested. And it is a labor work activities that need to be done, very intense.
Thank you, Pierpaolo. And if I can bring in Ameya in terms of Mark's take on the level of technological manifestation into Indian construction practices, what's your take where we are, and what do you think we should be doing in terms of our technological orientation in the construction industry? There are questions which are asked on digitization, and Pierpaolo did answer that, that China market has been a lot reliant on digitization. But Ameya, in terms of construction technology, what do you think? Mark did mention that we have some way to go. What's your take, please?
Thanks, Nimish. And I'll answer the technology part, but just, if I can, go back and give some quick stats and, the context, India is losing $25 billion worth, money every week. And with 10 weeks, it is $250 billion. 10% of that, if we say, is construction. Construction itself is, looking at a, kind of a loss of revenue of $25-30 billion of investment being wiped out. There are 25,000 projects across India, about roughly $600 to $800 billion. So it's a big thing. And I think Nayan earlier said Indian construction employs 8 to 10 million, workers and migrant workers. Now, one of the largest construction company in India today is holding 2.5 lakh laborers on their sites, spending 15 crore rupees a day to kind of get this back on track. So India is, as Mark said, it is a little more labor intensive in terms of the construction. And in terms of use of technology, I think all the A-grade contractors and the developers do have, invested into technology. I mean, the tallest residential building anywhere in the, the world is being built in Mumbai. So there is technology and we talk about modular. All these things are there in progress. And before COVID, it was on. But what is now going to happen is, on one side, yes, there is a need of, trying to reduce the dependency on labor, and there is a lot of investing quickly into technology. But you also have a big liquidity issue. Today contractors, developers, and customers, you would have only limited amount of money to invest. Would they invest in getting their work completed and delivering the project and getting in their revenue cycles by the buyers or the end users, or they invest in technology? So I think it has to be a gradual way of investment. Some of it is already there. We need to be a little more smarter of how you do it. And then Internet of Things, I think that is a quick win. Things like labor coming back. Use simple things like RFID technology, for example. There is a digital thermometer, and some more those type of techniques could be used. But long term, I think Nimish, I do agree that there will be a shift in the technology, and there will be lesser reliance on the labor as much as we can, because one thing was labor was cheaper, but now with all this disruption, we don't know whether the prices would still remain same, and in fact the labor component of the construction cost could actually go up in the short term. So I would say technology is there. We need to look at it more, but this is our opportunity to really fast track some of the things, and that's what Mark and Pierpaolo said, which is what the community should look at.
So if I can actually lead that question to Nayan Bhai also, and with the view that, so this is a question which has been asked by an attendee also, Mr. Jayan Sharma, and that was something which was there on my mind also. Financial and strategic decisions can be taken up by construction firms to reduce capital expenditure exposure and subsequently achieve liquidity for operational expenses in short term. Now, while we're looking at this, the investment in technology, whether it is in prop tech or construction tech, how do you think, how are developers looking at it? And we will go back to Deepak Bhai later on for the product mixes. But in terms of basically capital expenditures, optimization, and then requirement of the industry to mechanize and automate and use technology, where do you think we will strike a balance, Nayan? Right?
Uh, Actually, Nimishji, currently we are all looking at the very real short term of survival, and you know, there is no doubt that if we survive for the next 12 to 18 months, we'll think of such things. That's honestly the position as of now.
Right.
And see, fundamentally, the developments that happen in the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, they are not so large enough that you can have substantial mechanization happening at the max you can do is aluminum foam work, as Ajay mentioned, maybe an RMC plant over there, maybe get ready-made toilets over there or ready-made plaster and stuff like that. But basically, Indians prefer something which is not standardized building. If you see some of the NADA buildings which have been done by BG Shirke, and next to that is the normal brick and mortar building. People feel कि वो बाजू वाले में ज़्यादा दम है. Kind of. It's
Yeah.
the rustic thing that the customer has. No doubt, the one which is built by prefab is far more better, far more stable, far more cleaner, far more quality. But the Indian psyche has to accept it fundamentally. And there is also the big issue of climate also too, because with very thin walls during the summer, it becomes so difficult for people to manage the control, manage the temperatures. So replying to your point, yes, in the long term, a lot of initiative on this has to happen. We need to see that we can bring down the construction completion time of a 20-story building from 18 months to 9 months, and how we can really do that, and in that the approving authority also will have to work a lot, because as you know, Mr. Gupta, today, that after we start the foundation work, we reach a certain level, we again have to go back to the planning authority and ask for a commencement certificate. Secondly, most of the buildings here are brownfield today. So unless one building doesn't come up, you cannot get the FSI for the free building and stuff like that. So I think it is the need for construction technology has not got so critical today, that you have to start looking at it as of now. Finance is a very big issue. The approving part is a very big issue today. The liquidity is a very big issue today. So, its time will come, but not immediately.
Okay, Deepak Bhai, if I can go to you, there are some related questions on this. Do you think there is a time to look at the use cases over here, whether these are use cases related to rental houses or, for that matter, mixed use development? Traditionally, real estate development, whenever we have talked about it, we have generally restricted our thought process either to residential sector or to commercial sector. We have never gone beyond that in terms of understanding whether real estate can actually enter into the industrial real estate, warehousing, so on and so forth. So what's your take on that, Deepak Bhai? Is there any suggestions you have, given the fact that that's a question which I'm going to ask later to Pierpaolo as well, in terms of the supply chain from China, how will that impact the industrial real estate in India?
Overall, challenges with the COVID point of view and post-COVID, definitely there are many areas with many expected changes are there in the overall scenario in construction and real estate industry. Per se, traditionally we have been doing residential, we've been doing the offices, and then retail, roadside retail, later on migrated to the malls and the shopping centers. Legislative issues for accepting other than what we've been doing traditionally is always there. The challenges with the rental laws in India, all across the world, we see a lot of rental buildings being constructed, rental projects for the entire project for renting it out are being constructed. here in India, lot of restrictions were there earlier. Government under the housing department in central government is definitely now realize the issues, and they are working on reframing the policies where rental houses being become like a business, and where not only regular families but the white collar workers working in different cities get houses on a rental basis, how best they can do it. They have appointed a committee. Committee has given the report, and it is in the advanced stage where it was about to move. Maybe in COVID time it is not moved, but post COVID definitely we are expecting some policies coming from the central government for rental businesses point of view. The revenue return is always the concern for every businesses. Any business doesn't become viable, nobody would put in the money. As of now, the revenue return on rental for residential is very, very low. Its average annualized maybe 2% or little plus or minus 0.5% to 2.5% or something like that. It doesn't work out to be attractive or viable for any developer to do rental business. Along with legislation, government need to come with a lot of changes to encourage the rental housing projects to developers by giving various concessions, various tax benefit and incentive that people, developers or the companies take up the large rental housing projects also. And I do hope, and yesterday only Finance Minister, Honorable Finance Minister, she announced about the migrant rental housing. That is another area. How and what way we'll have to wait till detailed announcement comes. So these are the things where definitely is product where rental housing point of view. As a developer also we've been thinking that it should be also one of the vertical within our organization. Waiting for some clarity from government, maybe further down the line we can expect from government. Other than that, of course, as you mentioned about the warehousing, the industrial things and all, the e-commerce business has grown big way in the last 5 years. A lot of opportunities are being developed for e-commerce, for warehousing. Industries also, along with warehousing, is also developing. Developers are looking at the opportunity as a long-term player for e-commerce point of view, other businesses point of view, supply chain point of view, the warehousing business, that is also accepted. Other product mix like co-working, co-staying and all were there in the market. Lot of challenges due to COVID time. It has to change the working of the co-working things and all till people it becomes acceptance to user post COVID after lockdown. So companies are looking at various challenges in co-working space, but we do expect that these are the area where rental housing will definitely come to India. Migrant, the government has announced, but regular rental housing will definitely come. Warehousing and other industrial house, estate business is there, and it will grow, it will prosper, and we will definitely expect that large volume and more players will participate in that. E-commerce business will be definitely a good growth area based on that support point of view. Warehousing has to move.
Yeah.
Residential, of course, everybody has realized the importance of home, staying home in lockdown period. So residential point of view, people have even realized that having half a room for the office, staying home, work from home. So expected aspiration level is having some additional space for everyone. Joint family, moving to a separate nuclear family and all. So we expect that gradually recovery in residential may come. Job loss, economic slowdown, and even cut down in salaries, lot of challenges. But these are the area definitely gradually recover.
Thank you, Deepak Bhai. If I can come to Ajay before going to Pierpaolo, because that's a related one. Ajay Bhai, in terms of the supply chain, we had a lot of import happening from China. I mean, do you see that being impacted? So there was an impact when the import stopped completely. But what's our take right now? What do you think is going to happen as a developer? What will they be trying to do now with respect to their sourcing approach and their procurement behavior when they used to get a lot of product from China? And I'll go to Pierpaolo immediately after this in terms of his take on how China is seeing that.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think most of the developers have started already thinking that things that are available easily in India for your construction use, I think it's better to go by that. For example, lifts and elevators, we get a good variety in India now, and even up to 3 meters per second. So we really need not always depend on China in getting all those things back here. Of course, there is a supply chain issue that comes, which will be addressed along with the infrastructure that is being built in India, but it will take time to reach that, because every time we need something on the site, always we have issues about supply chain, whether we will get it on time or not. That's why we take those decisions of getting things from abroad. But I think if that improves overall in India, and if I can get the things that I need on my site from another city very easily, and I think it's more better, because you don't open LCs and pay money in advances. So even our cash flow, which gets affected by opening an LC and paying advance amounts, I think that will also become better because you're buying things from India. So with all the production agencies, if they try to get something similar, so even when we going back to technology, what I was discussing earlier, that just like we have a Fitbit which you wear in your hand for health, if you have wearable tech gear on your hand, you can get all your labors and all your staff with that on the site, and check the quality of the labor, their body, their health, their temperature. Then you can get in your augmented reality and your air control, air quality sensors and all that. So again, I mean, builders would not easily want to embrace technology, but I think a lot of technology, not very expensive, but maybe 25 rupees a square feet, which can be passed to various stakeholders which are there in the system and explain to them. We can use this lockdown period to effectively communicate and address these issues, so that we all are in sync with each other. So when it opens, we don't we are still hand in hand with how we have to progress. So I mean, there is a belief that things are going to be very expensive in terms of technology, but that's why we see, for example, a retina eye scanner. We've not yet got it in Bombay airport. For that, we've got it in other countries. But I think this period the government should have used to get that in, and all the people, like just like Aadhaar card, should be registered in a retina eye scanner, so that a person can be detected whether he has COVID or not from the retina eye scanner. So these kind of technology seems expensive, but if we have Indians producing that through their warehousing systems wherever in place, I think we can get things at affordable prices.
Thank you, Ajay. If I can go to Pierpaolo, in terms of the supply chain, in terms of China's share of export to India, how do you think there was a stoppage? Is the internal consumption good enough for them to be able to supply to India? Or given the policy measures you have right now in China, do you think the export to India will also take some time to come back to a little bit of normalcy? Plus the fact that there is a little bit of movement of made in India concept which is happening over here. So how do you see China will look at it?
Well, I cannot answer to a large scale in every sector of the market, because we should understand what was the stockpile prior the coronavirus. What I can see is that the import in the supply chain of materials and goods that are used then to produce export has slowed down and has still, of course, to come back to the normal. So there is a disruption into the supply chain. What I've seen this morning as a data is a plus 10 or 12.5%, I don't remember exactly, into the overall export from China. So if we take this as a sign of quick ramp up to the normal, I think that it is positive. Having said that, there are still limitations to the import and therefore to the production of goods from what is import as prime material, for example, that limit the capacity rather than in this moment the capability of production. To make an example that is not directly related to our built environment, but how China is suffering from the global pandemic, is China is a big importer of rice from Thailand, and this has been disrupted. So China is, due to the coronavirus, importing a fraction of the rice that was used to import before. So this can happen in other sectors, or where China is importing goods for not the consumer here in China, but for making production and then export. But I saw also a restart in this area and a self-sustained economy that is able to provide by itself without that much demand from import.
Thank you, Pierpaolo. I think self-sustenance is possibly the key for China. That leads me to the next question, which is actually a very important one from construction perspective. If I can go to Mark again. Mark, with respect to planning of projects and with respect to the project procurement and delivery models, do you foresee a change in China and the Greater China on those models which they have been working upon?
Well, I mean, I think the supply chain question is very interesting there in terms of materials, because certainly I can say in Hong Kong we saw an immediate effect of the China shutdown, and we weren't able to complete construction sites because we couldn't get supplies of light fittings, carpets, and so on, which came from China. And it was interesting, I thought, in Modi's address, and it wasn't, and in fact the press haven't made a big thing of this. But he was very targeted to say that the measures that he was bringing in were around self-sufficiency. And we're now seeing in this part of the world that, the problem isn't getting now materials from China, it's getting German-made materials into data centers and those sorts of things, American products coming into American tech companies, data centers, that we're unable to get coming through. So I think inevitably it will have an impact on procurement. I think the other thing to bear in mind, if COVID is a continuing threat in the world, and I think that's where the rest of the world has to acknowledge they're not the same as China. China has clamped down everything, and Korea very much the same, and their track and trace is streets ahead of anywhere else. And I wish, and I support Ajay, that if we all have things on our wrist, and I'm perhaps an example of this because I've returned to Hong Kong and I'm actually in quarantine. Now, lots of countries talk about quarantine, but the way it's done here is you come in, you get a test, you go into quarantine, you get tracked. So if anyone else on the call, they can see this. This is me actually in quarantine with a wristband on, which is tracking my location to no more than this hotel room. So for 14 days, I'm not allowed out of one room. Now, that's what they mean by quarantine. Now, if we think in the developed world, even in Europe, let alone India, where has never been strong on following rules, we could enforce that type of regime. I think we're kidding ourselves. So I think in terms of then how that plays out in terms of construction procurement and the way we look at things is going to have a massive impact, and the way that it will impact on efficiency. So you're going to have to allow that every so often you're going to have to test people. You may have to stop the site if there's an outbreak of COVID-19. You're going to have to make allowances for people, having hand washing facilities, for bigger canteen areas so people can separate, sort of for splitting teams so that if one team gets sick, on a large construction site, you can still carry on with the rest of the construction site. That all will have an effect on the construction process, and no doubt on the way that we procure our construction projects going forward. Overlaid with the points that Ajay's made about new ways of construction, will drive also different procurement routes in the way we look at getting the built form constructed going forward.
Thank you, Mark. And if I can then go over to Ameya. Ameya, you are an active consultant to various clients, an advisor, wherein you try and basically help them understand the modern methods of construction and modern methods of procurement. Uh, Given what we are seeing right now, do you think you have an advice for the developers in terms of looking at their delivery models and their procurement routes?
Sure, Nimish. I think the procurement, Mark covered some of it already. Procurement is going to change. One of the simple things which many, the first and a simple advice the developers don't need it from me, but still to say that there are going to be a lot of insolvent suppliers, unfortunately, in the market, and that is what we're telling our clients here to watch out, because today they take the advances from you and they might have to go back and service their other liabilities. So insolvent suppliers is something which we are looking at. So as we are going back to business, and starting the sites, I think there is a lot of communication and collaboration, and we're looking at those things of, is the supplier having enough left in their working capital? How is the situation with them, and are they likely to go bust? Big ones may not, but India is full of MSMEs, and that the supply chain is filled of small and medium suppliers. And coming back to the contracts, I think, Nimish, what we found out was, there are going to be a lot of claims, and those are the questions which we get asked. What are the claims? And we are helping many of our clients to first get around what has hit them. So many construction suppliers, contractors are putting claims, asking two types of claims. One type of claim is about the idleness of the government lockdown, but also there is a likelihood of a bigger claim of the whole remobilization, because everyone spoke about it in the call, and I'll not repeat, but there will be a few changes and few investments which will need on the physical infrastructure at the site, and also to use some quick win technologies to support that, so to get it effectively back, in terms of setting up the site again, the labor camps, etc. So that's another thing which is going to happen, where how do you procure there will be changes in the contracting model. And what it looks like is, going forward, the construction industry is likely to look at a alliancing model, whereas everybody's fair share of profit is protected, but then you go a collaborative way to the common goal, rather than trying to play hide and seek and make money out of the different waves of construction. So that is what is happening. And also, in the last point I would make, Nimesh, is people are asking us, there are no clauses of force majeure, there are no clauses of suspension. So either of the parties, be it a contractor or be it a client, they are unable to today evaluate, because those contracts are very loose and open ended. So now people are asking us, what is the advantage of using FIDIC contracts, for example, which on the big projects are used in India, but is not very prevalent at this point of time. So what are the merits and demerits of using those international ways of contracting? So all those things will change. People are looking at additional clauses of how epidemic like COVID should cover. And one of the other things which is coming to us is insurances. I mean, both the healthcare as well as the disruption. Is the workman compensation insurance covering for these type of disruption? I mean, in Gujarat earthquake, we saw it in the past. Where it became a contentious issue on who pays the insurance for damage due to earthquake, etc.
Thank you, Ameya. If I can go to Nayan Bhai. Nayan Bhai, do you think there will be, that's something which Ameya has also been saying this, will there be a change in construction costs post-COVID?
I would like to say, we just did an estimation of one of our projects, and we found that the difference is about 2 to 3% as of now.
Right.
Uh, and mainly because cement and steel, I don't know, I'm very surprised as to why cement and steel prices have gone up. They shouldn't be actually going up. And one has to see when the labor comes back, how much percentage of the labor comes back, that we will actually know what will be the labor cost, because labor cost would be plus, given plus minus, would be about 18 to 20% of the cost of construction. So
Right.
that I'm not able to estimate as of now. But replying to you, no such significant jumps in either reduction or in increase of the construction cost. That's number one. There's one thing, Nimish, if you permit me, I wanted to tell everybody.
Sure, sir.
Post-COVID, there are great investment opportunities now available in India. You know, as Deepak mentioned, that the government has said that they want to utilize their own land for affordable rental housing on a PPP basis. That is, the land will be given by the government, and these homes will be constructed for the migrant workers and for the poor. I think this is a great opportunity. Over and above that, I think within a 6 months to 1 year, when the economy really starts, really picking up, there is going to be a sudden surge in the demand. And at that point of time, there will be great investment opportunities available over here. And I feel if there are people who are part of the financial trade or any influencers, then they need to start looking at it, because even if you want to invest some money, it's not that you just land in the country and you start investing. You need a lead time of 6 months, 1 year of talking to developers, understanding the business plan, understanding their pedigree and stuff like that. So there is a great opportunity for construction updation, investment in the real estate industry. So that is what I wanted to share with everybody.
Thank you, Nayan bhai. If I can actually ask a small but a rapid one to Mark. Mark, do you think there is going to be an increased prefabrication in China than already it is? We have seen China erecting a hospital in 10 days. We have seen them erecting a building in 48 hours, and maybe Pierpaolo can also pitch into that. But do you think there are going to be more? There is going to be more affinity towards prefabrication?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure there is, not just in China. I think that's a continuing theme that we've seen for years. I'm just surprised at the slow pace of change that there has been, and I think, as I said earlier, if there's one positive to come out of COVID, it may be the acceleration of the construction industry into new ways of working. If you look at manufacturing industries and how they've evolved, they have evolved, sort of about 70 times faster than we have in construction. We still lag woefully behind, the manufacturing industry. And if you just look at how cars are constructed and yet how we construct homes, it is not just homes, but the built form in general. It is so much more labour intensive and wasteful, really. If you look at the sort of environmental impact of what we do, I think we've got to improve all round in terms of that, and I'm sure this will help to drive that.
If I can go to Pierpaolo on this, Pierpaolo, is the regulatory framework in China is so supportive and enabling that people can actually create wonders in construction by erecting buildings in 10 days or 48 hours. So what is so special in China in terms of an enabling ecosystem?
Well, a reality check is this. The Wuhan hospital that has been started from greenfield up to the complete erection and start up in 9.5 days.
Wow.
It's been done thanks to, of course, a massive use of prefabricated technology, true, but a 24 hours work with thousand of people in the same site. Has been estimated that just to make the foundation that was ground zero, of course we haven't dig down, has been used 2,500 people every day, just for that. so how intensive and the mobilization of the people is an advantage that China can have still. If we think about during the lockdown in Wuhan, only in Wuhan has been sent 42,000 medics to cope with the coronavirus emergency there. So I think that, of course, there are questions about safety of the construction. There are questions about is it possible in other parts of the world to do the same with the same speed and efficiency? At which cost is that? Of course, then on the other hand, as has been seen, for example, in UK, there has been a massive use of the army for construction, the army in terms of engineering. So there is an added value during the emergency that has been put in place that as at the basis of what this country is doing when there are emergency situations. It's equally true that China is still the place where last year, for example, have seen the completion of the majority of the skyscraper in all the world and the majority of the contributor in all the world. So there is an endemic way of speeding up construction that is still far quicker than any other place in the world.
Thank you, Pierpaolo. Ajay, if I can come to you, I want a very interesting take. What do you think the developers in India should be doing to adopt prefab or modern methods of construction as their way, as their thought process? Because we heard Mr. Nayan Bhai saying that in terms of tier 2 cities, we only see an upgradation of technology in adoption of ready-mix concrete or aluminum formwork at the max. But Ajay Bhai, what is that which will excite people to try and actually adopt construction technology? At the same time, given the fact that RERA is now coming in terms of making sure that they closely monitor the progress of the project, while we have been given 6 moratorium by most, but I do believe post that our life is not going to get finished in 6 months. We have life after that. In terms of a long-term strategy for our real estate developer brothers, what do you think they should be doing to work towards breaking their resistance or towards adopting technology in their projects?
See, first of all, I think the scenario in India is very completely different. The social and the civic things compared to China or any other countries are totally different. Like here, if we have to work for 24 hours and get a project completed and make up a loss of time, it becomes difficult. Means we can just imagine doing that, for a 3-day wedding where you get your event planners and completing your wedding sets for 3 days. We don't see that happening in our construction where we have to finish it in 24 hours. Now also given a chance and we have to go and complete our project before monsoon or even try to complete it, we need to work 24 hours. Now the way we live in our country and the way we have our social neighborhood with windows open, so I don't think machinery or technology where we can use in the overnight. So there are restrictions of work, but at the same time we have to lift certain restrictions, maybe during weekends or maybe early start in the morning, because we need to now understand one thing, that we have lost a lot of time, and what we can get saved with is gaining this time back in terms of the number of hours we give to work, because anyways we are going to suffer with the migrant labor issues, and maybe not, but as of now, to be more efficient, we need with ourselves is the time. And I think certain rules and regulations should be relaxed so that we can complete projects in time. So even if we get technology or warehousing, supply chain, but if there are timing restrictions, that material is kept down at the site and not taken up at the end of the day, and the laborers leave, then we get restricted with the time, because I think maximum 9 hours of time is there on the construction site. I think that should increase majorly.
Thank you, Ajay. Mark, if I can come to, sorry, Pierpaolo, go on.
also now that it's not anymore an emergency situation, that the construction site in the majority of cases has been allowed extra hours. So in the evening, in many cases, they can continue till 8 o'clock and they can work during the weekend. I have, where I live just in front of me, a couple of sites for mixed use and office, and I can tell you that they are definitely working 7 days out of 7.
Oh, wow.
But sir, how many public holidays are there in India and how many government holidays are there in India compared to how many holidays happen in China? That is a huge difference, because here, just before you are going to pour concrete in a slab which is ready, you have your Sunday coming and you have your Maharashtra Day coming, or you have your XY Day festival coming. So our work gets disrupted because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
Mark, if
and-
I can, sorry, Deepak bhai, you were saying something.
Yeah, to add further, there are two different type of projects, especially in city of Mumbai and MMR. One is a brownfield and one is a greenfield project. So whatever best we could do to achieve the speed in greenfield is can be thought about it. But brownfield, as we again explained, with coexistence of neighborhood, lot of limitation. There it is a major challenge.
Right. Thank you, Deepak bhai. Mark, if I can come to you for a very interesting take. Is there an integration of FM into construction? And I'm going to talk to Pierpaolo later on also onto exactly this point. Is there an introduction of elements of facility management into construction management right now, and possibly more from the perspective of real estate also? Is the real estate going to see a change from FM perspective?
Okay, I was just reflecting on Ajay's comments, and maybe we should be bringing wedding planners into our construction projects, and that might speed things up. Yeah, I mean, again, this goes back to the digital question, and I'm not quite sure how it relates to COVID-19, but I think in terms of FM, and people talk about the digital twin, and I think this is where you've got to be careful, is that's where we're seeing FM into construction, and you are starting to see now people build on all of that, then can integrate seamlessly into FM, and the sort of life cycle costing issues then become much more apparent, and so on. So I don't know whether that answers your question. I mean, it's a very academic debate at the moment. But going back just on the sort of progress of what we might see and how we might see, sort of us move on to more modern methods of construction. I think one of the more interesting points about that is Nayan's point about, sort of the Indian psyche of, you put them in a modern constructed block as opposed to a traditionally constructed block. And I think, we saw that in the UK when people started to produce prefabricated houses. They were timber framed, and therefore when you knocked the wall, it sounded hollow. And as silly as that sounds, that actually put a lot of people off buying modern, well-constructed houses until there was an education program. So I think, winning over the hearts and minds and educating people about what is good in construction, what's green about the building they're living in, how it's good for their health, and bear in mind, sort of lots of the health issues we're seeing now will become exaggerated because people will be more concerned about the air that they're breathing, the hygiene. Even in Hong Kong, which has had a fantastic track record in controlling COVID-19, has had outbreaks where COVID has spread through buildings, through the sanitation system. So all of those things, I think, will need to be looked at. Now, whether that links to your FM question, I'm not sure, but I thought it was perhaps some important things there to sort of bring out from those previous conversations.
Thank you, Mark. Pierpaolo, if I can come to you you just released a very important guidance today for not just the country in China, but for rest of the world to take it up. Would you think that there is something which needs to be done with respect to real estate and construction in making sure that FM guidance becomes an important part of your day-to-day behaviors?
Well, in short, yes, definitely. what Mark said about quoting BIM is not just for China. It's a global issue that needed to be addressed because forgive me if I'm blunt, but the majority of cases of BIM use is a very much glorification of what we were used to do in 2D. We are very, very far from using 5 and 6D BIM facility and technology. So the full integration and putting at the center of the building and at the center of the building life cycle, the BIM use, and therefore the link with the cost, and therefore the link of the operation, means that the facilities management and the property management will elevate their function up to the asset management. Now, with the opportunities and the opportunity, sounds very odd, but it creates an opportunity to highlight the importance of property management into the running of the operation, because otherwise you cannot run the building. Yeah. So we have been lucky and fortunate to create the link between Vanka Service and Cushman and Wakefield, who has recently joint venture creating the biggest in China players in that field, and the government of Shanghai for the city financial center, and put together a guidance for restarting the building for after the recovery of the coronavirus. And this is a China practice, of course, has a lot of compliances with what the government has asked to do. Maybe is not applicable everywhere. We cannot say that it's a global best practice, but it's the way China has come out of the crisis and has put on the spotlight how important is the property management in that. Also because from Nimish, you were asking what's the role of the government in that. Very often in this period, the government has delegated to the building owner and therefore to the property management operating the building a responsibility in getting in entrance and exit, in keeping safe the building, and as a delegated full responsibility. So in this crisis has created an opportunity for putting in the front line property and facilities managers.
Thank you, Pierpaolo. And while we are getting close to our end time, I'm going to ask one rapid question to each one of you in terms of what you think the life would be and what are the learnings. So, if I can start with Nayan Bhai. Nayan Bhai, what's your learning from this, and what is your suggestion? What is your advice to the developer fraternity?
Self-reliant.
Sorry, sir.
To be self-reliant, not depend on
self-reliant.
Any SOPs or any incentives or anything. It's a time that has taught us that we need to be self-reliant. We need to stand on our legs. If something comes from the government, that's a bonus. And the way I look at it is, this is the time when it's going to be extremely painful, Nimish, extremely painful. But the day we come out of it, we will be our foundation will be really strong.
Yeah, will be more resilient. Absolutely. Thank you, Nayan Bhai. Deepak Bhai, if I can come to you on this.
There will be a lot of opportunity getting developed post-COVID. As a developer, one need to be little strong enough to bear the challenges and pain for at least 1.5 years. And if you are able to sustain, then there will be a simple opportunity for every developer to grow at faster speed.
Thank you, Deepak Bhai. Ameya, if I can come to you, please.
Yeah, I think the lesson learned is Nimish, Black Swan does exist. So
Absolutely.
that is what has happened. But what has happened on a serious note is resiliences of the business and the models of whatever businesses we operate, be it developer, consultant, or contractor. The resilience of your business has been tested in all this.
Hmm.
So that's what has happened. And in terms of how do we go forward, all of that what's being spoken about here is relevant in one way or the other. So it is a good time to take a pause and re-baseline things in the business, whatever they are. We spoke about a lot of things today. So re-baselining is really the opportunity. So whatever happens, how do you kind of, after the survival, of course, is the basic, but how do you come stronger and build a long term phase 2 of whatever businesses we have post COVID.
Thank you, Ameya. Ajay, if I can come to you, and in case you have any questions in your mind, also request you to jump in, please.
Sure. I think now it's a time that has come whether we don't have to think about what, but we need to think about how. And we don't need to think about when the lockdown will end. We will have to think about what we will do when the lockdown ends. We don't think about what changes we have to make in our organization, but how we are going to make the changes in our organization. We don't have to think about how costly or how expensive it's going to be. We are going to think about how we will budget it and try to compensate it by using that budget somewhere else and compensating some at some other places. So I think that positive thinking from the what to the how is required in our industry. In fact, in all the other industries also, the same question needs to be addressed, because everything is connected to this real estate. Any job creation is also connected to this real estate. So if we do not try to revive this and be positive without expecting too much from the government, I think the mood of the people to go back and build, because we are the builders of our nation. So we need to always think not about going into other activities and other businesses, but to how to revive this business and build it and make it more better, I think.
Thank you, Ajay bhai. That's very well said, and that's very encouraging. Mark, if I can come to you, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I've learned out of it is, I mean, first of all, how resilient the human race is. And actually, when you consider that thousands or hundreds of thousands of people are dying through this, how resilient the population has been to cope with lockdown. But from a sort of more pragmatic view in terms of our business, how we've responded to it, and how we could have very easily all packed up, gone home, stayed safe in our respective homes and apartments, and waited for the crisis to end. But we didn't. We immediately tackled this head on and looked at what we should be doing as industry leaders, how we could reshape the business, how we could continue doing business through all of this. And pretty much, I know Pierpaolo was saying that there's been a shutdown in China almost immediately, but our China business, it was shut down because of Chinese New Year, but it pretty much returned to people at home, working from home, and continuing to support our clients through all of this. So, sort of that's one of the sort of great learnings I've taken from this, the sort of resilience of people to continue through a crisis, and actually, not to give up, to look at the opportunities it brings and how that they continue to support that. And then I suppose the other thing is I see a great clamour, and I see lots of architects putting out the new way of working and all of those things, and us all clamoring on the digital bandwagon, and what might come of this, and how new cities might look, and how we might all be affected in the future. But I think for the immediacy, and what I have learned from China is, if you're going to get out of this and you're going to get out of it quickly, you've got to come up very quickly with some pragmatic ways of doing that. And I do mean really pragmatic. I mean down to, if you look at the difference between the Asia world and the European world, and the way that masks have been used, which appear to have contained it, the way that just simple thermometers. We're all talking about getting a wristband on everyone, but sort of just getting a simple thermometer, literally within days of all this hitting. All of the security staff in our building were equipped with electrical, digital thermometers, and everyone was being tested when they walked through the door. Now, whether that had an effect or not, but you can't argue with the numbers. Hong Kong has less than 31 live cases now, and is right on the doorstep of China, and has managed to contain, in a city of 7 million people, very compact and very confined, and they've managed to contain COVID-19 to date.
Thanks a lot, Mark. That's very encouraging. Pierpaolo, if I can come to you, Mark did pick up around resilient cities, and if you can basically help us in terms of understanding with resilience being built post-COVID, and should there be a second wave, how do the measures today will help us in dealing with this resiliently?
Well, has been said a lot of time, in many times now, and even Mark said now, resilience and efficiency has been really the key. Hong Kong has been a success, definitely, and is still has locked down the border pretty much immediately, imposing a ferocious quarantine that is still in place to each and every one coming into Hong Kong. Mainland China has mandated the test to each and every one enter from any part of the board, and continue to lock down areas where there is a coming up of the virus. The government has mandated use of mask everywhere. Just now has been relaxed a bit. Everyone entering any place, including simple supermarket, to go and food shopping, you get your temperature measured. There was the time where in the past month going around, I've been checked the temperature 4 or 5 times. I've been allowed to come in and out of my compound during the lockdown 1 every 3 days, just to do food shopping, and with a special permit. So these are things that I think at the beginning of our conversation, Mark was saying that in the Western world sometimes will be difficult to apply for different reasons. That has, I think, has helped quite a lot. Even now that we are in a more relaxed way, temperature is measured to everyone, masks are used, and there is a level of personal alert that has helped the business to start up. Definitely, I'm sure about that.
Thank you, Pierpaolo. I think we need to go back to the basic definition of democracy, which is by the people, of the people, and for the people. So if the people understand the common sense of living in a democracy, living by the rules of basic civility around the rules which are being made, I think sometimes we may not have to look at liberalization for the sake of talking about it, but at the same time implementing it for the sake of saving the human race itself. I have been pretty enlightened, and I have attempted to make sure that the question and answers, the questions which are being asked in the panel, I've picked some of them and made sure that I camouflage them in with my questions also. Having said that, 1.5 hours is possibly too less a time to conclude the learnings from China, which has seen it from December onwards. So it has been 5 months. Culminating that in 1.5 hours would not be possible. But at the same time, I really thank all the panelists, everyone over here, to try and reflect it on the learnings from China, making sure that what is our Indian perspective on some of those learnings, what is that we can do. And I'm extremely thankful for each one of you for their last piece of advice to our developer fraternity and construction fraternity on what they should be looking at the world post-COVID. Thanks a lot, everyone. And I hope with these learnings, we possibly will be a more resilient country, and we possibly will be living in a more resilient world. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you. Stay
Thank
safe.
Hello.
Take care.
And
Bye.
bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.
And
Bye
bye.
bye.
Yes, can we hear you, Nayan bhai?
I say thank you, Mr. Mark, thank you, Pierpaolo. So nice of you to come and share your knowledge with us. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you
care.
to you. Pleasure.
All the best.
Thank you
All
all.
the best. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Nimish.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thanks
you.
to Harshul Savla also, Dr. Harshul Savla, yes.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks a lot, Team MCHI, to make sure that it happened.
Right.
And
Thank you,
I
Nimish,
must
for
thank
the invite.
Pierpaolo and Mark that we kept them very late in their evening. Thanks a lot for making it happen.
No worries. Thank you, my
Mark,
friend.
Thank
Thank
Mark,
you,
all the
everybody.
best
And
and hope
good
your
luck and
quarantine
take
gets
care,
over.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
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 Bye.